One of the things I love doing is interviewing people about firsts. The first person to do this, the first person to do that. Especially more exciting to me when we think about when they did these first things. We have with us tonight an inductee into the Lake County Women's Hall of Fame, and you'll find out a couple of the firsts that she did. Will you please join me in welcoming tonight's honoree, Joe Tucker. You know, I sat on my notes. Can you believe that? I actually sat on them. I'm going to do this as delicately as possible. Okay, there we are. Like I said, we're going to go all the way back to the beginning.
Yes.
And you're okay with that, right?
That goes back quite a ways.
So why don't you tell all of us, when were you born?
February the 24th, 1939.
And where was that?
Franklin, Kentucky.
And what was your father's name?
Robert.
His full name?
Robert Caden West.
And what did he do for a living? What was his occupation?
He was self-employed. He was a painter.
And your mother's name?
Hazel Alexander West.
And she was a housewife and took care of the house?
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about her, what kind of a woman she was.
Well, she married young. She had 7 kids. I was kind of in the middle. She was a stay-at-home mom. She worked some, but most of the time she stayed at home, being a housewife and raising kids.
And so you just kind of hinted at that you had siblings.
Yes, I had 1 sister, 5 brothers.
That leads us into my next question. Yeah, I think everyone can know what that means. Your sister, was she the same age as you?
She was 10 years older than me. She was the oldest in the family.
So 5 brothers. What was that like, growing up with 5 brothers?
Kind of rough when you're the only girl actually with the boys, and I was kind of like a tomboy in a way, and I played mostly with my brothers and their friends.
Boys tend to play rough. Did that,
yes.
that happen with you?
Oh yes, I was just as rough as they were.
So there was maybe a game of cowboys and Indians that maybe got a little out of the hand. Is that
yes.
story you want to tell us?
Yes.
Well, I talked my brother, who was right under me, his name was Eddie, I talked him into going up in the attic. We were playing and I hung him.
All right.
I was a little bit, well, we was playing, plus I was a little bit jealous of him getting all the attention. And so he started kind of choking and turning blue, so I got scared. I got him down. He's still alive to this day.
That's good to hear. Yeah. But hang them high.
Oh, yes.
They call this foreshadowing in other kinds of stories. What was it like to grow up in Kentucky, in the southern part of Kentucky like you did?
It was really good. It was a small town, and of course you knew everyone, and I had family, and all my relatives lived there, and it was just really good growing up like that.
Did you enjoy school?
I loved school.
And were you good at school?
I was on a roll all the time.
Y'all knew she was smart. Come on now. Those of you that knew her. Yeah, come on. We always talk ahead of time so that we can familiarize ourselves and get to know each other and have this story the best way to present to you. It's interesting to me when I look at the ebb and flow of people's lives, and had you stayed on the trajectory of being good in school and in Kentucky, your life may have been a bit different, but something happened when you were 13.
My family decided to move to Indianapolis, Indiana.
What was the reason for that? What promoted or prompted?
Jobs were scarce around there, and my dad had a chance to go to work for General Motors. So we made the move.
So a good move for him and for the family financially.
Yes.
Indianapolis is only 4 hours away from Franklin, Kentucky.
Yeah.
But culturally, you said it might as well be another world. How is it different?
Well, I got teased a lot over my southern accent, of course. And it was just, I was too far ahead of them in school.
So, yeah, you were that far ahead.
Yes. And they used to use me for substitute teacher, actually. And because I was just too far ahead of them and everything. And they didn't know what to do with me.
Did you feel like, did that encourage you to do better in school, or
No, I didn't like school up there. It changed my whole outlook on everything. And I missed my friends and family back in Kentucky, and it was just different.
As you said, your sister was 10 years older than you. She was still living back in Kentucky, is that right?
Yes, she was married and had children.
So did you get a chance to go back and visit?
I went back to visit with her, yes, during the summer.
I'm trying to figure out how to get you to this point. I'll just say it. You went back and decided not to leave. You decided not to go back home, back to
Well,
Indianapolis.
she introduced me to her next door neighbor's son, who was in the U.S. Army stationed at Fort Knox. And of course, I kind of fell for that uniform. And I ended up staying with her.
Okay, you were how old at the time?
15,
And how old was the uniform?
22.
So I think this may help us lead to your first husband.
Yes. Yeah.
What was his name?
James.
James Owens, is that right?
Yes.
All right, so.
He called me one night from Fort Knox and said he'd got some extra money in his pay, wondered if I wanted to go to Georgia. I said yes. So he came down the next morning and we took off to Georgia and got married.
So came back with a different last name.
Yes.
A few years later, you met someone new, actually, a new man, right? You know where I'm going with this, in 1957, December. Who was that?
Oh, that was my first child.
Okay.
Yes.
Not in a bad way. She didn't mean a new man. She meant a new young man.
Yes.
And his name's also James?
Yes.
Where was your husband stationed at the time?
Fort Knox.
Okay. In February of 1959, your family grew again, is that right?
Yes. I had a daughter, Linda.
Linda.
Yes.
And Linda's with us today. Hello,
Yes.
Linda. Thank you. So Fort Knox, can you describe a little of that experience before we go? Because we know that people in the military move around, but what was it like first there at Fort Knox?
Well, it was a very big place at the time. It was the main training fort and everything. I was the stay-at-home mother until my kids went to school.
But then you were stationed elsewhere.
Yes.
Your family of four, your husband, yourself, and 2 children.
I went to go to Germany.
Germany.
He got stationed in Germany.
It's a little farther away than Indianapolis,
Yes,
obviously.
so I left with 2 kids, went to Germany, stayed there 3 years.
Okay. What was it like living in Germany as an American?
I loved it. We lived in a village. We was the only Americans in the village. And we was about 7 or 8 miles from base. But the people just accepted us and everything. And it was just really great. Couldn't have had a better time.
Did you get to travel at all while you were there stationed there?
Yes, we went to Austria. I went all over Germany, and we went to Luxembourg, and went to Switzerland. And we started in Holland, and my youngest daughter was a baby there. She was born over there, and she got sick, so we had to head back to our main base.
You said, how long were you in Germany?
3 years.
Now you said that you left with 2 children. How many did you come back with?
3 3/4.
I hope that means that you don't have like a one-legged child. That means you had that means you were pregnant.
Yes. Yes, I was in my last month of traveling and when we came back. And in fact, our orders got messed up and they weren't gonna let us come back yet. And they was gonna send my husband and kids back and leave me there. And so finally, they got our orders straightened out at the last minute and I was able to go home.
Where did you come home to?
We came back to Indiana for a month's leave, then we went back to Fort Knox.
So back to a place you were familiar with.
Yes.
As you're going to see tonight, folks, we're going to talk a little bit about breaking barriers. This lady has a knack for doing that. So tell us a little about working with the Red Cross when you were at Fort Knox.
Well, after my children got all in school, I started doing a lot of volunteer work. I worked for the Red Cross. I worked in the schools, and I worked for the Army Community Service, publicity. I was very involved in the NCO Wives Club. In fact, I was chosen Mrs. NCO Fort Knox. I worked,
Were you the first something with the Red Cross? You
yes,
told me?
I was the first NCO wife to serve on the advisory board for the Red Cross.
And just explain to us what the difference, those of us who don't know the difference between, the wives who were there had all been officers' wives before?
Yes, from general's wife, colonel's wives.
And NCO means
Uh,
non-commissioned officer, right?
non-commissioned.
Were there other opportunities for you to work around Fort Knox? Actually, once your kids were in school?
Yes, I finally started working in the photography shop at Fort Knox. I worked mostly in the office, and then I went out to the different training companies. We covered all the social events that went on at base. Plus, we did all the trainee pictures when they come in, where you see a soldier sitting in front of a flag. We did those. And then I would go out to the companies and do the collections, show them their proofs, and then deliver the pictures, and then I worked in the office during the day.
So this was a pretty, the hours were not typical office hours, is that right?
No. We usually went out to the training companies at night. During the day, I worked in the office.
We're talking about a story that takes place, this part of the story is in the 60s, and we know the Vietnam War was going at that time.
Yes.
Did that affect your husband's
Yes.
military experience?
He went there twice.
In 1971, your family experienced, you and your 4 children experienced some trauma. What happened?
It was early 71. We lost my husband.
I can't imagine raising 4 children as a single mother. How did you make ends meet?
Well, I worked full-time, plus I was drawing Social Security and VA from the government.
So tell me how you met a gentleman by the name of Wiley Tucker.
Well, one of the ladies that worked with me, her husband was my future husband's, he worked under him and everything in the office. And she invited me over to their house one night to have dinner and play a game of darts. And so I said, okay, don't have nothing else to do. So I went over, and I didn't know they had invited him too. So we had dinner, we ate, and we played darts and just talked.
Was it their intention to play a little matchmaker, you think?
Yes.
Yeah, clearly. Obviously, you're not sitting in Fort Knox now. You got to Florida somehow. Did that have something to do with Mr. Tucker?
Well, he was waiting on, he was the command sergeant major, and he was waiting for his retirement. So he brought me and the children down to visit Florida. And so we went back, and he moved back down here when his retirement orders come through, and the kids and I followed.
How did your kids adjust to that change? It's a pretty big thing to do. We could probably do an hour with your children asking this question. But let's let Mom tell her version, and then y'all can later on tell your own.
They were used to moving around. last year we were there, we moved 3 times in 1 year. So that part didn't bother them. It was kind of hard for them to adjust to a stepfather at first.
Now, why was that? What qualities about him made
We
that?
bought an older house and we were trying to remodel it, and of course he had them all involved in it. And he was very regimented at first and everything.
Now you're not looking at these kids right now, but the way that the heads are doing this very slowly, I think they're agreeing with you, and also they're not agreeing with him. Yes. Okay, I'm sorry.
But it all worked out good. Yeah.
I will say, and the other children may not like this, but Linda told me that it was not that now she realizes what she learned,
Yes.
how many great things she learned at the time.
Yes.
And did his career have anything to do with the way he your home life? I just I should ask that.
Well, he had them, doing their cleaning, and he'd come in the kitchen with this white glove, and and so they learned to make sure everything was clean. Of course, my youngest daughter hid everything underneath her bed.
She's telling on y'all. All right, so you moved to Florida. Now, this is an interesting point, and this is not a judgment, but you moved to Florida. You had not yet married him, actually.
No.
And why did he? What was his idea of moving to Florida? Did he have another career lined up?
Yes, he was planning on, he'd already been hired by the Mount Dora Police Department.
All right, I don't know if any of you have been married to police officers or law enforcement before. I think it's very bad marriage etiquette to give your future spouse a parking ticket. Might not help. Did he give you a parking ticket one day?
Yes, he did. And he made it mandatory that I appear in court. At that time, we had the city court and everything, and so I had to appear in court, and my case was the last one to come up, and he told the judge he would forgive my ticket if I would marry him. So, we got married that night in the city court.
I kind of asked this question already, but I just like the way it's worded here. Did your children warm up to him right away?
It took them a little bit, but then they did after that.
A lot of us know that you have a historic connection to law enforcement in Lake County. In fact, if you read the paper today, you might have an idea about that. But your life story so far really doesn't foreshadow what you would go on to do as a career. So how did you get involved in the field? What encouraged you to get involved in law enforcement?
Well, my husband was getting ready to go through the academy, and the chief asked me if I wanted to go through too, because we have just married, and said, well, you'll learn a little bit more about his job and everything. So he would sponsor me. I said, okay, why not? So I did, and I got hooked.
It's I think one of the things I've learned doing these interviews, and when you talk to people, you start to realize the really minimal, small things that can change a life completely. And that really has changed your trajectory in your life.
Yes.
So I find that fascinating. We all know that police training requires some rather physical activity. So did your husband have a problem with you throwing people around in hand-to-hand combat or anything?
Well, I threw him through a door. We were doing hand-to-hand, and we weren't supposed to actually take hold of a person. Of course, he wouldn't let the other guys work with me. I was the only female in the class. And so I got kind of carried away, and I threw him through the door.
So did he bounce right back into the room right after?
No, he stayed out there and had a cigarette. He was too embarrassed.
We also know that law enforcement requires you to handle a firearm. So how comfortable were you during training with that part of the process?
Well, it wasn't the first time I had actually fired. When I was at Fort Knox, involved with the NCO Wives Club, I was the program chairman at one time, and I had organized this little class of shooting and everything, and we had the pistol club to teach us how to shoot a .45. So I had a little experience with it.
So your husband, you graduated the academy, obviously. We can get
Yes.
to that. Your husband did go to work for the Mount Dora Police Department, but you weren't able to. What was the reason?
No, at that time, you could not have two people working for the same department.
So how long did he work for Mount Dora, and where did he go afterwards?
He worked for a year, then he went to Traveri's Police Department.
All right, so you eventually did get hired from Mount Dora. How did that happen?
Well, they would use me before then. Of course, I wasn't paid, but when they got a female prisoner in, of course, we had city jail at that time, then I would go down, do the strip search and all that. And then after he left, they hired me on school crossing and marking tires downtown, and
For parking tickets and that kind of thing.
yes.
Did you want, at the time, were those responsibilities they had given to other women in the past? Crossing guard and marking tires?
One person before me.
Did you want to do more than that?
Yes, I did.
So, at that time you began asking for a road patrol assignment. I mean,
Yeah.
now this is where you're getting into some territory that,
Yes.
you're a woman, you're just not supposed to ask for. In what year is this, 1970?
Started out in 70, well, I started working there in 72.
Mhm.
So I'd been working a little while there when I kept wanting to go on patrol.
You told me maybe a conversation with the mayor kind of helped.
Yes, when I'd be downtown walking, the mayor was an attorney and he had his office downtown. He would call me in and just talk to me and everything and how's things going. And he wanted to know was I happy with my job. I told him yes, but I wanted to patrol. So then he called me in one day. He said, there is an opening. We'll have to take it before the council. He says, but I think you should have an opportunity. So I went before the council and they voted yes. There was an opening. I was qualified, so I was hired.
Can you describe to us what, maybe not, you don't have to be specific about Mount Dora if you don't want to, but at the time, we're talking in the early 70s, what was Lake County policing like at the time? What was the environment like?
Well, it was the good old boys, more or less.
Put that right in front of your face. Just angle it,
Okay.
you're good.
It was the good old boys at that time. Sheriff McCall was sheriff, whichever one's heard of him. And I got, I'd go out on a call and sometimes they'd tell me, send a man. I'd say, you got me.
There you go.
And of course, I got a lot of stares from people when I'm driving around and everything. And it was rough, and trying to get some of the guys to accept me was hard.
Well, they certainly weren't used to having a woman on the force, obviously. Did they have to change some of the ways they did things? You don't have to get too specific. It's possible that you may have said one or two things that you don't want to share, and I'm perfectly fine with that. You can say whatever you like.
Well, they had their little ways and things they did on the midnight shift that they did what they wanted to do, let's say. And of course, with me working, they couldn't do all that.
You told me it was pretty rough at the beginning, dealing with not only the other police officers, but also the public's reaction.
Yes.
Was your husband supportive of you continuing this?
Oh, yes. There was a lot of times I went home in tears. And I'd say, I'm not going back. And he'd say, yes, you are. You're not a quitter. You're going back. And I'd go back.
Speaking of the way the other officers treated you, there was an experience you had where they sort of tested your abilities. Tell me about that
Well,
Saturday.
it was on a Saturday. I was the only one that showed up for work. Everyone was sick or doing something, I don't know. So I had the whole town to myself. I was patrolling over in the east town section of town. which was at the time kind of rough. And, well, at that time too, our walkie-talkies were very, very old. They were about the size of, almost the size of a book almost, but most of the time they didn't work. So you get out of the car, most of the time you didn't have any communication. So I had a black gentleman to stop me, said, we've got somebody over here with a rifle shooting up everything. So I called into the dispatcher, said I'm going to be out of the car, and gave my location. Well, they tried to get a hold of me after a while, they couldn't. So the assistant chief was in his office that day. He was supposed to be my backup if I needed one. So the dispatcher told him, said, you better go check on Joe, I can't reach her. And about that time I came back on, said I was on my way to the station with a prisoner. And at that time we didn't even have cages in our car. So you put a prisoner in there. But I had one of the other gentlemen there says, I'll go with you. And I handcuffed him and everything when I arrested and put him in there, and I carried him in the busted rifle that I busted upside the tree.
So you talked him out of his rifle and then busted his rifle?
I busted upside the tree, and I carried him in under arrest.
So, I'm skipping ahead a tiny bit, but I want to ask this question now because it works for this. I think it explains how you did this. You still are. You're not a buff woman. You're not muscle bound. You're not like we see police officers that are walls of flesh.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And our pictures show that you were quite a small woman.
About 110 pounds.
So how did you deal in those situations where most people would use force?
You learn to use psychology. You use your brain. I could talk them into handing their guns over to me and their knives and things. And you just learn how to talk to them.
You also, when you think about policing at the time and race relations and the fact that most Lake County towns have areas that are more predominantly black, that did you find that those people reacted more negatively? The people who lived in that area lived more negatively or positively towards you in the way you policed them?
They were positive to me. They told me, Miss Joe, no one's going to ever hurt you over here. And they were behind me all the way. They would call one officer, they'd ask for me to come out. And I think it's the way I presented myself to them.
So after the busted rifle and the prisoner and showing your skill, and the other officers may or may not have intentionally not been at work that day, who knows? Did their attitudes toward you change, the other officers?
Yes, they found out that I could handle myself.
Once you were able to gain their trust and their respect, were you left at the lower levels or were promotions available to you?
It didn't take me too long and I made sergeant.
You told me that it wasn't just the men who were resistant to a female police officer. There was a time during training. Would you tell me about that experience with the female instructor?
Oh, yes. This was after I was a sergeant. I was going through supervisor's training at Lake Sumter. And we had to go through different levels. And we got money from the state on each level. It would raise our pay. So I was going through the supervisor's course at that time. And we had a female instructor from up north somewhere. And she started in saying it was not a job for women. Women could not handle it. And I told her, I beg your pardon. I differ with you and everything. And there was 3 or 4 guys from my department, and they all spoke up in my favor. Says, we're here to say woman can do it. And I later on got a letter of apology from her.
Did you like being on road patrol?
Yes.
What was it about it that you especially enjoyed?
I just enjoy meeting the people. And our chief did not believe in us working traffic a lot. he wanted us to work the communities and to be seen, know the people, let them know us and everything. And I just enjoyed meeting the people and helping where I could.
How did you get into investigations with the Mount Dora Police Department?
There was an opening, and the chief at the, I worked under 4 different chiefs, and the chief at the time, he just called me in, wanted to know if I would go in there. He wanted me in there. He felt that I could do the job. So that was it. I became an investigator.
I'm assuming that you used different skills. So what
Yes.
skills that you had helped you in that position?
Well, I would go behind the officers and work the robberies, rapes, just whatever they needed to follow up on.
And I think you were the first female to be an investigator, a
Yes.
detective in Lake County, so another barrier broken.
Yes.
Congratulations. Did you enjoy that work?
Yes, I did.
But there's a but. It sounded like there was a but at the end of that.
But I still miss being out with the people.
How long did you work in investigations? I mean, to the closest 3 days or something. No, I'm kidding.
I don't know, it's either 2 or 3 years,
Couple
about
of
2
years.
years or something, I'm not for sure.
But you did eventually decide you wanted to get back on the road.
Yes.
You went back on the road in what position?
I was acting lieutenant in charge of patrol division.
That's pretty impressive too.
Yeah.
Might be a first too. That's
Yeah.
pretty impressive. Do you have any stories from that time you want to share about your experience in road patrol after going back from investigations?
Ah,
Oh, wait a second, that's it. Okay, so she's got a couple of notes for her, by the way, which, no problem, I have notes, you don't have any, so I'll get that. But I didn't see that story beforehand, so that's why I'm laughing. Okay, tell me about what, I can't even say, the garbage-bagged prisoner.
well, in fact, it was, I got a call one night, I was working night shift. And in fact, it was in this area where the library is now. There used to be a couple of houses back in here. And I got a call, there was a man drunk, just roaming around. So I headed up this way and I got there. Well, I had been sick before that. I was coming back to work, I had the flu. And I was feeling pretty bad that night. But I got up here and then my backup came and the guy was drunk. He had stunk like everything. He had vomited all over himself. He had defecated in his clothes. And so anyway, we've got to get him out of that area. So my backup knew that I was sick. So he says, I'll take him back over to the area for you. I said, okay, I appreciate that. So we're looking around in the back of the patrol car looking for a garbage bag. We made the guy a new outfit. We put holes in it. But before we could put him in it, he had gotten in the other patrol car sitting up front. I won't repeat what the officer said.
Oh my God.
And anyway, we got him over in the bag. He got him in the other patrol car. And of course, the officer, he put all of his windows down. Went speeding over there to take him home. And I'm following behind him laughing. And anyway, he had to go back to the station and change cars.
I can imagine. Oh my goodness, yeah. That's the one I haven't heard that story before, so it just got to me for a moment there. The Mount Dora Police Department, if you look at the history of Mount Dora Police Department in the late 70s, early 80s, you might see a little bit of a tumultuous experience, wouldn't you?
Yes.
I think at least one of the chiefs that you worked for was arrested, which is a new experience probably for him.
Yes.
You don't have to go into it if you don't want to.
That
but
was the last chief I worked for.
And then there was a new chief coming in that wasn't necessarily, he wasn't nice to you specifically.
No, that's the reason I walked.
So you left in 1980, is that correct?
Yes.
And you did something for a short time. Where did you work? Where a lot of Floridians go.
I worked at Disney for about 3 or 4 months, and I was overqualified, and I couldn't handle it. It was
Doing security there at
Security,
Disney.
yes.
Now this sort of dovetails into, because we haven't really talked much about your husband. During your time on the force, the job that was his, that you went into just so you kind of know what he was doing, didn't pan out for him. What was it about his training that made that?
Well, he worked for Traveries for a year, and he was just too military, too regimented. Being a command sergeant major, and then working for a small department where things aren't too organized. It was hard for him to do.
So did he went back to school?
He went back to school, and then he opened up his own business. It was home improvement.
Is that something I should ask her about now? Because I don't know what that is. Do you know what she's going on about? Do you want to share that story? No? Okay. It's all right. It'll be in the extras of the DVD maybe or something. Well, I think you may have referenced that in the newspaper article, did you? Oh, no. All right, well, there you go. So he went back to school for something? You may have just said what he did. What did he go back to school for?
He went to school, and then he opened up his own business, home improvement.
Okay. After you left law enforcement, did you get to work with him then?
Yes, I worked with him some.
What did you do?
I'd go out with him on the jobs and do whatever had to be done. Jack of all trades.
Now, by this time, your children are older, right?
Yes.
I can say that, y'all are older. That's okay, right? And what did you decide to do for your next employment? I think, and it references at least one of your children.
Yes, my oldest daughter was working with the developmentally delayed young people, so she got me into that.
And what was the kind of work that you did there?
It's helping to train them, getting them to out in the public, how to do things, how to get jobs, how to have their own homes, and just teaching them the life skills. I'm going to go a little out of order with the questions that I sent you, just so you're okay with that. You did that for quite some time, Yes.
right? And even other children followed into that
Yes,
line of work?
My youngest daughter's doing it now. I got her started, and if she started, and I quit.
So you've since retired. I would like to ask you, looking back on your work, and so I mean, starting from even the unpaid stuff, working in charitable work
Yes.
with the other wives at Fort Knox, working in the field of law enforcement with the developmentally delayed. What was your motivation? What made you do those particular things?
I just always wanted to do something different. I did not want to be just an ordinary housewife. And I just felt there was more out there that I can do.
When did your husband Tuck pass away?
December 2003.
Looking back on it now, how would you describe the life that you were able to build with your second husband?
Very good. He pushed me into doing whatever I wanted to do. And I always had him behind me.
One of the things that we really, that I like to make sure when someone says, oh, this person would be a good living legend, I don't like people that have stopped. Because, human beings don't stop.
Yeah.
I don't really want someone that watches Price is Right every day and then is just excited because later on Wheel of Fortune comes on and then Jeopardy and then, I want to make sure that the person is still active. So you've retired, but that wasn't enough just to retire. So.
No, I was bored. I didn't have nothing to do.
So tell me the kind of things you decided to do.
So then I started a singles group. And we're still going, and actually we've got one person in there married, a couple people married, and but we
You still let them
visit.
come, because even if they go, they're
Yeah.
not single anymore, but you let them come.
We meet every week and go out to a different place for lunch. We travel together, and we do a lot of things together.
Traveling, I think, is important to you, is that
I
right?
love traveling, yes.
So do you have a favorite place you've been so far, or?
Well, I think the favorite was when I took my family back to Germany. My daughter wanted to go see where she was born, so we went back to Germany.
I won't even mention, we talked about riding camels. I
Oh,
think
yes.
that's a dangerous activity at any age, but let alone.
Yeah, that was one thing that some of my singles ladies I did. There was 4 of us went camel riding. It was something different. I'd never done it. So why not do it?
You haven't left your police department days behind you, though, because there's a gentleman who worked on the force who's come back into your life. There's clapping from the children, okay?
Yes, one of my ladies from my singles group, she knew his sister-in-law, and so she was there one day, and he was there. They got to talking, and she found out that he used to work for Mount Dora Police Department, so she asked him if he knew me, and he said, of course. So she wanted to know which I saw her later, she said, can I give him your phone number? I said, oh, yeah, why not? So,
This wasn't that long ago either, right? This is not years and years and years.
no, this has been almost 4 years, be 4 years in December.
You've been inducted into the Lake County Women's Hall of Fame.
Yes.
That's an applause break. Yay, congratulations. You've been featured in the newspaper many times. I mean, today you were in the paper. You're now a living legend of Lake County. Considering all that you've accomplished in your life, what would you say is your proudest achievement or achievements?
Well, of course, my children.
Are they prompting you over there to say us? She said, of course, my children, yes.
But I think opening the door for women in police work. I felt there was room for both sexes in there. There's no job that one sex should have.
Absolutely.
There's room for everyone, no matter what you want to do.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. I think that's the best way for us to end my question. So will you do me we'll do a wrap up in a moment. I would like, if you're comfortable with taking a few questions,
Yeah.
and if anyone asks an impertinent question, either I will beat them up or you will use your brain to talk them out of whatever it is. Did anyone have any questions for Joe? Did I plant at least one question in the audience? Ma'am in the coral shirt back there.
I was wondering how you felt about forensic working in that field.
So she wants to know how you felt about working in forensic field, or when you were a detective, maybe some of the forensic activity.
Now,
Or now, what it's like now.
Oh, I would love it now.
I bet you.
Yes. If I was younger and still going, I'd hit every field I could in police work.
Yes, next to her.
I'll just stand up. I'm sure I should.
Oh, I can see you now.
Okay, I have a question. When you first started working as a female police officer, did you notice over the years that you were getting paid equally? Was it always equal pay?
Yes, I got equal pay. Yes. Which wasn't much.
You mentioned your height requirement. There was no, how tall are you?
I'm 5'3½".
Okay.
You're very focused on height, ma'am, but I understand that because I'm like 5'6", so I certainly understand that.
When I grew up, there was a height requirement in Brooklyn and New York City. You could not be a police officer.
She's talking about the height requirements to be a police officer. I'm just getting that so that people who watch this in 30 years will, in the time capsule, will know what we're talking about. So was there a height requirement of any kind?
No, only requirements we had, you had to be married and you had to live in the city limits of Mount Dora.
Okay, I'll ask the question. What was the reason for marriage, you know? Right?
That
Very
was
pro-marriage, apparently. That's good.
I guess they.
Maybe they didn't want a lot of single police officers with other, yeah, okay. Let me go back to what the men were doing before the women. No, we're not going to go there. Ma'am, right here, yes.
Were men then required to be married?
Were the men also
Yes.
required to be
Oh,
married?
yes.
Yes,
Yes.
I like that.
Yes.
In the back, there was a question, yes, at the very back.
Yes, Joe, you're a very attractive woman now. Your younger picture was even more so.
Oh,
Did
thank
you
you.
have a lot of trouble with sexual harassment on the force?
Yes.
Okay, let me repeat the question.
Yeah.
You're a very attractive woman now. And you were, and she has good eyesight, I know that for sure. And your picture shows that you're an attractive young woman as well. So did you have many issues with sexual harassment when you were on the police force?
A little, yes.
Ooh, it's getting juicy here, guys. It's getting juicy. And that might be expected as the first woman in police
Yes.
police work. Most of course, you're married, and most of them knew you had a.
Most
Command
of
Sergeant
them
Husband,
were,
yeah.
most of them were afraid of my husband.
Yes, I just see a hand. Go ahead, ma'am.
Were there any practical jokes that you could share with the group?
Okay, we're getting juicy here. Are there any practical jokes? And then she's held up a note at the front. Oh, I remember that story.
Well, yes, it's when I was investigator. I used to get calls at home sometime from my
Don't say narcs. Informants, right?
informants.
Sources.
Yes. And my daughter would answer the phone, and she sounded so much like me. She would take the messages and know where, and she would warn her friends, don't go out to a certain place tonight. Don't even watch it.
Gloria, yes, right here in the front. I'll come to you, sir.
It's fair to say the man in the bag was probably your most interesting story, but what story or what situation arose that you can now look back on and say you changed someone's life by intervening and kind of taking them off the street at the right time?
So Gloria wants to know, and this will give you time to think about it.
Yeah.
She wants to know that was there an example of a story where you were able to positively affect someone's life as a police officer that you know about? That
Oh, gosh, I really,
she basically just beat people up.
I
Apparently,
can't-
no, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
I can't think of any one
Well,
certain thing
do people
now.
still know you in Mount Dora? Are there people that remember you as a police officer? And
Not really,
Not really.
except some of the old cops that I
Yeah.
run into.
I will say, when we put this out on Facebook, at least I had several people message me, and one person, Glenn Waterman, I don't know if you know
Oh,
Glenn.
yes, Glenn
Glenn
worked
said he
under
worked
me.
with you, and that
Yes.
you were a very classy lady, in all capital letters, by the way. He wanted to make sure that I knew
Yeah.
that. And I know he could be a little bit, you probably had to discipline him a little bit, but yeah.
No, he was a good officer.
Good to hear. Good
A
to
little
hear.
bit lazy.
Okay, Glenn, if you're watching. Sir in the yellow cardigan near the back, sir in the yellow?
Yeah.
Yes.
What's your opinion of all the police and crime shows on television? Do you have any you like or any you dislike strongly?
Do you have a favorite or least favorite police or crime show on television?
I watch most of them. I really enjoy them.
Okay.
I don't know if I have a favorite, I just enjoy all of them.
Now, kids, I'm grilling her right now. This is your chance to ask her the serious. No. Any other questions? Anyone else have a question in the room?
I've got a statement.
You have. She has a statement. I like to hear. Hold on a second. If you're going to make an impassioned statement, let me give you a microphone.
No, I don't.
I do, because I want you to just go ahead.
I've known Joe for many years. We were police officers together. She is not only a lady, she is one of the smartest. I can tell stories. We back each other up. There's other people here.
Yeah.
I have a sore throat. There's other people here that have worked with her. She is, and always will be, one of the finest ladies, finest police officers. Thank you.
No one else is going to top that, and neither am I. So I hope you will join me in thanking our living legend of Lake County tonight, Joe Tucker.